Alien girl let the human guide her through the falling ash. Her reason for trusting him was the twist. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The ash was already falling in slow spirals when Ethan Cole pushed through the broken ridge line, his boots sinking into drifts of gray that whispered under each step. The air tasted metallic, dry enough to sting his throat. Above him, the sky rippled in faint red bands, the warning signature of a deeper rupture somewhere beneath the crust. His suit's visor flickered, a thin line of static dancing across its edge, and he tapped it lightly with a gloved knuckle. Hold together, he muttered. The ashfall wasn't supposed to reach this valley, but weather on Vela 4 had its own rules. Small flakes clung to his jacket, melted, and left faint silver streaks. Then he saw her, a lone silhouette against the pale drift, standing still as stone, as if listening to something he couldn't hear. Tall, slender, her skin a soft blue with a sheen like brushed metal catching dim light. The ash slid across her shoulders in delicate threads. She didn't seem afraid, only lost. Ethan lifted his hand slightly, a gesture meant to show he wasn't a threat. Hey, he called through the thinning static. You shouldn't be out here. The second wave's coming in less than an hour. Her head turned toward him, slow, deliberate. Her eyes glimmered silver, bright even through the haze. She studied him as though trying to read the intention behind each breath. Human, she said softly, her voice carrying an echo-like tone, almost musical. You walk with certainty. Ethan huffed a small, shaky breath. I wouldn't go that far, but I do know the way to shelter. Come with me. The wind picked up, scattering ash in swirling arcs around them. She didn't move. For a moment, he thought she was going to refuse. Then, silently, she stepped toward him. The ash thickened, falling in. Heavier flakes that brushed her face and dissolved in quick flashes of faint light. Some interaction with her skin's biolier, he couldn't pretend to understand. Ethan turned, lifting his arm so she could walk beside him, sheltered slightly from the drift. She accepted the positioning without question. That surprised him. Most off-world visitors avoided humans unless absolutely necessary, especially when the environment turned dangerous. But she stayed close, matching his pace, trusting his chosen direction. A rumble sounded under the crust, distant but deep enough to vibrate through the soles of his boots. She stiffened. He felt her inhale sharply. Easy, he murmured. The shelter's just past the ridge. Her eyes lifted toward him again, studying him with a quiet intensity, as if measuring something that only she understood. You walk like one who carries more than his own safety, she whispered. Ethan almost laughed, breath fogging lightly. I'm just someone who doesn't want anybody hurt on my watch. Ahead, the narrow cut between two boulders came into view, dark, safe, hidden from the drifting ash. He angled toward it, brushing another streak of melted silver from his sleeve. She followed without hesitation. Whatever her reason for trusting him, he couldn't begin to guess. Not yet. The ash fell heavier still, and together they crossed into the shadowed pass. The narrow pass swallowed the drifting ash the moment Ethan and the alien girl stepped inside, the wind softening into a distant hum behind them. The temperature lifted a few degrees, enough for the air to lose its sting. Ethan shook loose a thin layer of gray from his jacket, listening to the faint tap of ash against stone. Sarai stood just behind him, her silver-blue skin catching the dim ambient light and shifting hues. Even in the muted glow, she seemed to belong more to the quiet of this canyon than the storm outside. We will not remain here, will we? She asked, her voice low but steady. Ethan glanced down the narrow corridor of rock ahead. No, there is a shelter about a quarter-mile deeper in. Old survey station. If the power cells still hold, we might get heat. She tilted her head slightly, as if tasting the air. Heat is useful. He almost smiled. Her tone lacked sarcasm. She meant it literally. He stepped forward, boots crunching lightly on scattered ash that had blown inside earlier. She followed without hesitation. That blind trust tugged at him again, a quiet weight in his chest. Most visitors from larger empires barely looked at humans unless required by protocol. Yet here she was, walking in step with him through a planet-sized dust fall. The corridor narrowed before opening into a wide basin of layered stone. The sky was still visible above, a strip of dim red through the cleft, sending drifting gray down in soft spirals. Sarai paused at the edge of the basin, her gaze lifting upward. Ash landed on her cheek and dissolved in a tiny shimmer. Ethan noticed she did not wipe it away. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "No," she replied. "My skin filters the particulate. It is only light as it fades." He nodded, studying her profile for a moment. She stood tall, perfectly balanced, even as the hillside breathed out another light tremor beneath their feet. Not fear, not even uncertainty. Something else. Something like listening. She turned toward him suddenly. "You knew the path without surveying it. You did not hesitate." Ethan shrugged, readjusting his pack. "I have been working this region for 3 months. Enough time to learn its moods." "Moods," she repeated softly. "You speak of the land as if it were alive. Sometimes it feels that way." They moved again, climbing a gentle incline that curved around a boulder the size of a truck. His visor flickered once more, then steadied after he tapped it with mild annoyance. "These things always glitch in ash storms," he muttered. Sarai moved closer, studying the device. "Your technology is less resistant to particulate interference than ours. I will try not to take that personally." She blinked once. It was not meant as insult. Ethan breathed out a quiet laugh, but it faded quickly as the next tremor rolled beneath them, a little louder, a little deeper. He felt her hand brush his sleeve lightly, steadying herself. The touch surprised them both, and she withdrew it slowly. "The crust is restless," she said. "We should reach shelter quickly." "We are close," Ethan assured her. The survey station finally appeared at the base of the next ridge, a low metal structure half hidden by stone, its surface dulled by years of ash storms. Its signal light flickered faintly, almost ready to fail. "That is it," Ethan said, quickening his pace. Sarai remained beside him, steps silent, eyes focused. Not once did she look uncertain. Not once did she question the direction. Whatever reason she had for trusting him, it guided her as surely as his knowledge guided them both toward the shelter ahead. The survey station door resisted at first, the hinges stiff from years of ash settling into every groove. Ethan leaned his weight into it, and it opened with a low metallic sigh, releasing a pocket of warmer air that smelled faintly of old insulation and dust. A single overhead light flickered alive, casting a soft amber glow across the narrow entry room. Sarai stepped inside behind him, her eyes adjusting instantly, silver irises catching the light like small reflections of the lamp itself. Ethan brushed ash from his boots and scanned the interior. A control panel hummed weakly on the wall, its power cell indicator hovering just above the critical mark. "We have power for now," he said. "Enough to keep the air warm and the filters running." Sarai moved closer to the panel, her fingertips hovering an inch above the surface as if listening to the machine's faint vibration. "Your technology is old," she observed, "but it is persistent." Ethan chuckled quietly. That is one way to describe it. He walked deeper into the station, checking the seals on the small windows. Outside, the ash drifted past like a slow gray snowfall. Inside, the air settled into stillness, a welcome calm after the relentless wind. Sarai's gaze swept the room, lingering on the simple human tools arranged neatly on the counter. A folded thermal blanket, a cracked mug, a small radio unit with a worn dial. None of it extraordinary, but all of it useful. "Humans create items with such practicality," she murmured. Ethan shrugged lightly. "We try." She approached the bench where he set down his pack, her steps soft, almost soundless. "Why did you lead me here?" The question held no suspicion. It held something quieter, something like genuine curiosity. Ethan paused, resting a hand on the back of the metal chair. "Because it was the closest safe place. Anyone would have done the same." She studied him as though weighing that claim. The warm light softened the sharp lines of her features, revealing a calm he had not seen outside in the storm. "Not anyone," she said. "Many would have turned away." Ethan shook his head. "Not on my watch." A faint tremor rolled beneath them, gentle enough to be a reminder rather than a threat. The station walls absorbed the vibration with a soft groan. Sarai looked toward the ceiling, then back at him. You sensed the ground shift before the tremor reached us. Your posture changed. 3 months out here will teach you to read the signs, Ethan said. The crust talks if you know how to listen. She stepped closer, her expression thoughtful. And you listened for both of us. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but a soft chime from the control panel drew his attention. The external temperature had dropped again, the storm thickening. He exhaled slowly, adjusting the settings to reinforce the thermal shield. Sarai watched his movements, her silver-blue skin reflecting the amber glow with each shift of light. You carry a responsibility that is not required of you, she said quietly. He glanced at her. I would rather help than regret not doing it. She held his gaze for a long moment. The station hummed around them, a low rhythmic pulse that matched the softness in her voice. Human, she said, almost to herself. You walk with intentions that are rare. Ethan looked toward the sealed door, the world outside hidden beneath falling ash. Inside, the warmth held steady, and for the first time since the storm began, the quiet felt safe. The warmth inside the survey station held steady through the next hour, a quiet buffer against the drifting gray outside. Ethan monitored the control panel while Sarai stood near the single narrow window, watching the ash slide down the glass in slow, silent trails. Her posture was calm, almost serene, as if she were absorbing information from every shift of air and sound. Ethan adjusted the filter settings and glanced back at her. Storm is settling a little, he said. Not enough to move yet, but enough for the sensors to breathe again. Sarai did not turn right away. When she finally faced him, her expression held that soft intensity he was still learning to read. You remain attentive even when we are safe. Is that a trait of your people? Ethan let out a small breath, leaning against the counter. Some of us. I guess I do not know how to turn it off. She stepped away from the window, the amber light gliding across her silver-blue skin in gentle tones. It is unusual, she said. Most species relax when danger passes. You prepare for its return. That is experience talking, Ethan replied. This planet always gives you one more surprise. She approached the center of the room, her gaze drifting over the tools, the gauges, the worn edges of the metal walls. Everything about the station felt ordinary to him, but she regarded it as though seeing meaning in every simple human object. Your kind survives through adaptability, she said. You shape your surroundings not to dominate them, but to coexist. Ethan looked at her more closely. Is that rare where you come from? She considered the question, her eyes reflecting the soft flicker of the lamp. My people are logical, efficient. We approach challenges with precision and structure. Her voice grew quieter. But we do not adapt in the way you do. We do not rely on intuition. We do not trust something we cannot quantify. Ethan crossed his arms loosely. Trust is not really something you measure. She met his gaze, and for a moment, the room felt smaller around them. Yet you offered it freely, she said. You did not question my presence or my intention. You simply led me to safety. Ethan shrugged lightly. You needed help. That was enough. Another faint tremor passed beneath the floor, and the overhead light shivered. Sarai shifted her stance, reading the vibration like a quiet voice beneath the ground. The crust is calming, she said softly. The storm's origin point must be stabilizing. Ethan moved toward the window, watching the ash drift thinly now, like the tail end of a quiet snowfall. When it lets up completely, we can head for the main outpost. Should not take more than a couple hours. Sarai stepped beside him, her reflection faint in the glass. You plan for both of us, she said. Not because it is required, but because it is who you are. Ethan felt a warmth rise in his chest at the simplicity of her observation. I am not sure what that says about me, he said. It says you carry others without expecting anything in return, she replied. Her voice held no judgment, only truth. The wind softened outside, and the sky beyond the ash took on a muted, pale glow. Inside the station, the quiet deepened into something steady, something shared. Sarai looked at Ethan. Once more, her eyes bright in the dim light. This is why I followed you, she said. You walk with intention that cannot be taught. The storm eased, and for the first time since they met, the world outside no longer felt hostile. It simply waited. The ash outside drifted in thinner strands as the storm continued to settle, leaving the survey station wrapped in a muted glow that felt almost peaceful. Ethan checked the power levels one more time out of habit, fingers brushing the worn controls. then stepped back with a soft exhale. The room had grown warmer, the hum of the filter system deepening into a steady rhythm that blended with the quiet. Sarai stood near the window again, watching the soft trails of gray glide down the glass. Her posture was relaxed now, shoulders lowered, hands resting lightly at her sides, as if she had slipped into a state of thoughtful calm. Ethan approached, stopping a few feet away to avoid disturbing her focus. "Visibility is improving," he said softly. "We might be able to move within the next hour." She turned her head slightly, enough for the amber light to catch the soft metallic sheen along her cheek. "You monitor the storm with precision," she replied, "as if you have done this many times before." Ethan nodded. "Out here, ash storms come without warning. The first few teach you fast." Sarai studied him with that steady, almost analytical gaze. "Your species adapts through experience," she said. "Mine adapts through calculation." Ethan smiled faintly. Two different paths to the same goal. She stepped away from the window, moving toward the center of the room where the warmth gathered most. The light reflected off her skin in soft gradients, creating a subtle glow around her. "Would you have guided anyone through the storm today?" she asked. Ethan took a moment to answer. "If they needed help, yes. I would have tried." Her eyes softened at the edges. "You speak with certainty. It is unusual." Ethan leaned against the counter, letting the metal carry some of his weight. "It is just what feels right." She approached slowly, her steps nearly silent on the metal floor. "In my culture," she said, "decisions are made based on calculated benefit. Aid is given when it strengthens the whole, not the individual." Ethan met her gaze. "And what about when a person simply needs help?" Sarai paused, her expression unreadable for a moment. "Such consideration is rare," she said. "Unexpected." Questioned. He nodded, understanding what she did not need to say. "Well," he murmured, "I do not need a reason to do what I think is right." A soft hum rippled through the walls, a reminder of the storm's retreat. Sarai glanced toward the door, then back at him. "You risked your own safety to bring me here," she said, "even though my arrival was unanticipated and my intentions unknown." Ethan shrugged gently. "Risking a little for someone else is not new to me." She stepped closer, close enough for the warm light to reveal faint patterns across her skin, delicate lines that shifted with her breath. "Many would have chosen differently," she said quietly. Ethan held her gaze, steady and calm. "But I am not many." She looked down, her expression softening in a way he had not seen before, as if something inside her had eased for the first time since they met. The station settled into silence again, the kind that felt full rather than empty. Outside, the ashfall slowed to a gentle drift. Inside, Sarai lifted her eyes and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "This is why I trust your guidance," she said, even when logic would say otherwise. Ethan felt the weight of her words settle between them, not heavy, but meaningful. The storm continued to fade beyond the glass, and the quiet inside the station deepened into something steady, something shared. The storm faded to a whisper outside, the ash drifting so lightly now that it looked more like pale dust caught in slow motion. Inside the station, the warmth held steady, wrapping the room in a quiet that felt deeper than before. Ethan checked the sensors again, confirming the readings twice out of habit. The external temperature was rising. Visibility had climbed to almost 30 feet. The worst had passed, but neither of them moved to leave. Sarai stood near the bench where Ethan had laid out a few basic supplies, her hands lightly tracing the edge of a folded thermal blanket. She was not examining it the way she had studied the control panel earlier. This time, her attention was softer, more reflective, as though she were considering what each simple item revealed about the person who used them. Ethan watched her for a moment before speaking. "Once the air clears a little more, we can start toward the outpost," he said. "The path should be safe enough by then." She looked up, her eyes catching the warm glow of the overhead lamp. "You mean to lead the way?" He nodded. "I know the terrain, and I know how quickly it can change." Sarai stepped closer, her expression thoughtful. "You place yourself between danger and others without calculation," she said. "It is a pattern with you." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Is that a good thing?" "It is something I do not understand," she replied honestly. "But I am trying to." Ethan leaned against the counter, letting his shoulders rest. "What is it you do not understand?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Where I come from," Decisions are derived from logic. Everything has a measurable purpose. Trust is earned through proven data, not instinct. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with clear curiosity. Yet you trusted me before you had any information about me at all. Ethan considered that. Maybe it is not about data for me. Maybe it is just about doing what feels right. Sarai absorbed his answer, her gaze steady. Feeling is not a primary factor in my people's decision-making. It is considered unreliable. But you followed it today, Ethan said gently. Her eyes shifted in a subtle, almost contemplative way. Yes, she admitted. I followed instinct. And I followed you. Ethan felt the weight of those words, quiet and sincere. He shifted his stance, choosing his next words carefully. Did that frighten you? She thought about it, really thought about it. It did not frighten me, she said at last. It challenged everything I have been taught. A faint tremor rolled through the ground, softer than the earlier ones, more like the planet releasing its final sigh. Ethan steadied himself automatically. Sarai noticed. You sensed that before the instruments did, she said. You rely on intuition as your guide. He gave a small nod. Most of the time. She took a slow breath, the amber light catching on the thin lines that shimmered across her skin when she inhaled. My people teach that intuition is the opposite of logic, she said. But perhaps that is not true. Ethan watched her carefully. Maybe they work together more than you think. She stepped forward, closing the space between them by a single measured pace. Perhaps, she whispered. The station hummed around them in soft, steady tones. Outside, the ash settled into nothing more than a drifting veil. Inside, the quiet grew warm again, filled not with tension, but with the understanding forming carefully between them. Sarai held his gaze, her voice steady as she spoke the thought she had carried since the storm began. You guided me through the ash, she said, because your instinct told you to protect a stranger. She paused, her eyes bright in the low light. And I followed you, because something in me recognized it. The storm had ended, but something else had begun. The last of the ash drifted past the window in thin, fading strands as the air outside cleared enough for the pale horizon to sharpen. Ethan powered down the auxiliary systems one by one, listening to each quiet click as though confirming the world had finally steadied. Sarai stood near the doorway, her posture calm but attentive, the silver-blue shimmer of her skin reflecting the soft glow of the station's last lamp. She seemed to be listening to the ground again, sensing something within the crust that no instrument could fully register. The planet is settling, she said. The deeper fractures have calmed. Ethan nodded, tightening the straps on his pack. Then we should be able to move. The outpost is still a few miles out, but the terrain should hold if the tremors stay light. Sarai watched him for a moment longer, her expression thoughtful. You continue forward even when the outcome is uncertain. Ethan gave a small smile. That is what survival looks like out here. She did not return the smile, but something in her eyes shifted, a soft recognition of the truth in his words. When they stepped outside, the air greeted them with a faint chill. The ash no longer fell in steady waves, but hovered in delicate trails that swirled around their feet. The sky above was a pale red, muted and washed clean, as if the storm had scrubbed it back to quiet. Ethan moved ahead first, checking the ground with each step. Sarai remained close behind him, her presence steady, the soft gleam of her skin cutting through the gray. They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the gentle crunch of ash beneath their boots. Eventually Sarai spoke, her voice low, shaped by the stillness around them. Your people endure storms like this often? More than we would like, Ethan replied. But humans get used to unpredictability. We learn to read the world even when it does not make sense. Sarai considered that. My people avoid unpredictability. We construct circumstances to remove it. Safety comes from precision. Ethan stepped over a ridge of hardened ash and offered a hand to help her navigate the uneven ground. She accepted without hesitation, her fingers cool against his glove. And how is that working for you today? He asked gently. Sarai looked around at the vast, quiet terrain. Today, logic alone would not have led me to shelter. Ethan released her hand once she was steady. Sometimes instinct gets there first. They continued forward, following the faint markers Ethan recognized from his earlier surveys. The ash had settled in soft layers across the ridges, but the path remained visible if one knew where to look. Sarai's gaze swept the horizon as though memorizing each detail. You choose your actions based on feeling, she said, and you place your trust in it. Ethan nodded. I do. She stepped closer, her voice softer. And you expect nothing in return. No, Ethan said. I do not. She absorbed his answer, her eyes tracking his movement with that same quiet intensity she had shown in the station. This is why your instinct does not align with logical probability, she said. Yet it succeeds in ways our models cannot predict. Ethan glanced back at her, the wind lifting a loose thread of ash between them. Maybe that is what makes it worth something. They walked a little farther, the outpost still hidden beyond the next ridge. The quiet wrapped around them again, warm and steady despite the open terrain. Sarai finally spoke, her tone carrying a weight that had not been there before. I followed you because my logic failed, she said. But I remain with you now because my instinct has not. Ethan looked at her, the soft glow of the settling sky reflecting in her silver blue eyes. She held his gaze, calm and certain. Somewhere beneath them, the planet breathed out one last faint tremor, barely noticeable. Together, they moved toward the ridge as the world grew quiet again. The ridge rose ahead of them in a long, sloping line of dark stone, its surface dusted in soft gray that shimmered faintly under the pale red sky. Ethan adjusted the straps on his pack once more, then scanned the horizon. The outpost lay just beyond the ridge, hidden from view, but his memory of the terrain was steady. He knew they were close. Sarai walked beside him, her pace unhurried, her steps precise. The soft metallic sheen on her skin shifted with every movement, catching the filtered light in quiet flashes. She watched the terrain with an alertness that felt more like listening than observing, as if the planet's subtle rhythms spoke directly to her. The ground is stable, she said. The deeper fractures have quieted. Ethan nodded. That means we should be in the clear all the way to the outpost. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. You speak with confidence, she said. Not from data, from familiarity. When you walk the same ground long enough, you start to understand it. Ethan replied. You read the way it breathes. Sarai considered that, her eyes reflecting the faint glow of the ash field stretching behind them. My people would call that intuition, a variable that cannot be measured. Ethan smiled slightly. Maybe some things do not need to be. They reached the base of the ridge. The slope was gentle at first, then tightened into a steeper climb. Ethan tested the surface, then began ascending with steady, practiced steps. Sarai followed, her balance precise despite the uneven terrain. Halfway up, Ethan glanced back to check on her, but she was right behind him, moving with ease. You climb well, he said. Your balance is impressive. She lifted her gaze to him. My physiology compensates for unstable terrain, but your stability comes from choice. Ethan let out a small laugh. Or stubbornness. Perhaps they are the same, she replied softly. They reached the top just as a gentle draft swept across the ridge, carrying with it a cooler breath of air from the valley beyond. Ethan stepped forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as he scanned the wide expanse. The outpost stood in the distance, a low structure of metal and reinforced glass, its small beacon blinking steadily. Relief passed through him like a quiet exhale. There it is, he said. We made it. Sarai moved to stand beside him, her gaze fixed on the outpost, but her attention seemed to rest more on him than on the destination. You guided us through uncertainty, she said, even when logic provided no guarantee. Ethan felt her words settle gently in the cool air between them. I just did what I knew how to do. She held his gaze, her expression calm, but full of meaning. You misunderstand, she said. What you did was not simply navigate terrain. She touched two fingers lightly to the ridge's surface, almost reverent. My instruments detected the instability of this region long before the storm began. I should not have been near it. I should not have survived the initial rupture. Ethan frowned. Then why were you out there alone? Sarai inhaled slowly, her silver blue skin catching the shifting light. Because I miscalculated. And when the storm fell, my readings were compromised. I could not determine a safe path. She turned to him fully. But you could. Ethan shook his head lightly. I did not have better tools. I just trusted what felt right. Sarai stepped closer, her voice quiet. That is the truth I did not expect to find today. Ethan looked into her eyes, steady and bright. And what truth is that? She held his gaze without wavering. That your instinct is more accurate than my logic. A soft gust swept across the ridge, carrying gentle ash around their feet. The world felt still as she added, and that is why I trusted you before you said a single word. The ash drifted in slow spirals, the outpost waiting in the distance, but the real revelation rested in the quiet between them. The ridge behind them faded into a soft gray silhouette as Ethan and Sarai made their way down the far slope, the air carrying a faint mineral scent left behind by the storm. The ground felt firmer under Ethan's boots now, each step landing with quiet certainty. Ahead, the outpost beacon blinked in a steady rhythm, a small point of warm light in the wide stillness. Sarai walked beside him, her movements calm and unhurried. The metallic sheen across her skin shifted with each breath she took, catching the pale red sky in silver ripples. She seemed less guarded now, more present, as though the world itself had softened around her. Ethan glanced toward the horizon. We should reach the outpost in less than an hour, he said. Once we get inside, I can check the comms and send a signal out. Sarai nodded, but her eyes remained on him rather than the distant building. Your efforts have already exceeded what logic would require, she said. You ensured my safety before considering your own. Ethan gave a modest shrug. That is just how I was raised. You look out for the people near you. Sarai studied him with a quiet focus that made the air feel even stiller. Your actions were not based on knowledge of who I am, she said. You did not know my status, my purpose, or my intent. Ethan slowed his pace slightly. Status does not change what a person needs. Her gaze held his for a long moment before she spoke again. Ethan, she said softly, there is something you should know. He stopped, turning fully to face her. She stood in the muted glow, her expression calm, but carrying a depth that had not been there before. I am not merely a traveler, she said. I am a Luran envoy. My role is to assess the stability of alliances, to determine which species can be trusted in unpredictable circumstances. Ethan blinked, absorbing her words. So you were evaluating humanity? Yes, she said. I was sent to determine whether your kind relies too heavily on instinct, whether your decisions remain consistent when logic fails. She took one more step toward him, the ash shifting lightly beneath her feet. When the storm fell, my instruments provided no clear path. My training offered no certainty. But you. Her voice softened like the distant wind. You walked with intention that did not need calculation. Ethan felt a faint warmth rise through his chest, quiet but steady. You trusted me, he said. Sarai nodded once, her eyes bright in the pale light. I trusted you before I understood why. And now I do. A gentle breeze carried a thin stream of ash between them, drifting in a loose spiral before settling on the ground. Sarai lifted her face slightly toward the sky as if marking the moment, then met his gaze again. You guided me because your instinct told you it was right, she said. And my people measure strength through logic alone. She paused, breath steady. But today, I learned that instinct can be truth, and that humanity's greatest strength is the intention behind its choices. Ethan held her gaze, the quiet around them deepening into something almost weightless. She reached out, her palm hovering just inches from his arm, not quite touching, but close enough for him to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. This is the reason I followed you, she whispered. This is the reason I would follow you again. The outpost beacon blinked steadily in the distance, but neither of them moved yet. The world around them had fallen into a stillness that felt almost sacred. The ash settled, the wind softened, and in the silence that remained, Ethan saw his reflection in her silver blue eyes, steady and calm. For the first time since the storm began, she did not look like a stranger from another world. She looked human,